Yeah.
Welcome, and we will start, of course, with our bracha. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen.
And we'll start the screen share. So we can do a little bit more here. All right. We will go on actually with the text with this next little section. So we dealt with the Eshet Yafat Torah, and now we're going to go to the next section. Ki tiena la'ish shtei nashim. When a man has two wives, or if a man has two wives, ha'achat ahuva, the one beloved, v'ha'achat snu'ah, and the other hated. V'yaldu lo vanim, and they bore him sons. Ha'ahuva v'hasnu'ah, both the beloved and the hated one. V'haya haben habachor lasni'ah, and the firstborn was the hated one. Okay, was the hated ones. Don't let me finish. So it looks like Rashi is pretty happy. Let me make sure. Yes. Okay. He doesn't feel there's a need to explain that, although, as you can see, there's tons of Torah Tamima on this.
Yeah, but Rabbi, the firstborn always gets a double portion of the inheritance.
Spoiler alert! Spoiler alert! Spoiler alert!
But of course, it happened differently with Jacob and Esau. Her mother interfered, and the firstborn, which is Esau, didn't get the double portion. Jacob did, just the reverse.
Well, how did that happen? If we're going to go down that particular rabbit hole, how did that happen, Harlan?
I imagine the mother was kind of sneaky and
Nope.
put Esau's clothes on Jacob, and
different story. Different story.
Yeah.
Different story. What happened? Esau came home from the hunt.
Yeah.
He was famished, and
Yep.
Jacob said, "Sell me your birthright for this bowl of lentil soup." And Esau said, "Fine. I will do that." So he sold him his birthright for a bowl of lentil soup. And we could spend a little time analyzing what exactly the Torah is trying to tell us there. Okay. And you need some background, because now that you've studied with me, even though we are off subject now, okay, what was the most important thing about the firstborn, besides the fact that they got a double portion? Or should I say, why did they get a double portion?
I don't know.
Well, before the golden calf, what happened with the firstborn? Before the sin of the golden calf, what happened? What would happen to the firstborn?
They were God's.
Yeah, they were. Go on.
Except the Levites were substituted for them or something like that.
Okay, that's okay. You're on the right track. So the firstborn would have served as priests and Levites. The firstborn would have, and Esau didn't really want that. Okay, he saw more value in a bowl of pottage, okay, of lentil soup, than he did in serving as, being devoted to God in that priesthood. Okay, so ask yourself if there is some human element there.
Also, instant gratification. And if they were still teenagers or with a teenage brain, that's more important.
Fair enough.
They don't think ahead; they think of now.
Well, there we go.
Yeah.
There's a modern spin. But let's go back to our subject there. So yes, all right. So it goes right on to what Harlan was talking about, right? Still no Rashi. V'haya b'yom hanchilo et banav. And it shall be that on the day, I'm translating this as literally as I can, on the day that he inherits his sons, right? He gives his sons inheritance. Et asher yelo, that which is his. Okay. Lo yuchal levaker et ben ha'ahuva. He cannot. It's interesting that in Hebrew there is a verb made out of bechorah, right? He is not permitted to make the firstborn the son of the beloved. He cannot make the son of the beloved, give the son of the beloved the firstborn rights. Al pnei ben hasnu'ah habachor. In the presence of the son of the hated, who is in fact the firstborn. Okay. Kant, that law supersedes any kind of personal favoritism. Again, no Rashi, and in fact the Torah goes ahead and reinforces this.
Yeah,
Makes it
because we
perfectly
learned from
clear.
our bad experiences back in Rashi. We
Maybe.
learned from history.
Yeah. We try to, or we don't. Ki et habachor ben asnua. For indeed, right, indeed, the firstborn son of the hated one, Yakir, he will acknowledge, he will recognize, latet lo, to give to him, pishnaim, the double amount. Bechol asher yimatzeh lo, in everything that he has. And I assure you the rabbis are going to riff on that particular thing, asher yimatzeh lo, as to what kind of property is subject to the doubling. Ki hu reshit ono, for he, that is the son of the hated one, is the first of his strength. Lo mishpat habachorah, to him is the right of the firstborn, or the judgment of the firstborn. So it looks like there is a little Rashi here, right? Okay. Pishnayim, twice, or, literally twice as much. And he says, Keneged Shnei Achim. In other words, he gives, what it means is the amount that two sons would receive. Okay? So once you divide up the property, he would get as much as two of the sons. Okay? B'chol asher yimatzelo, okay, in everything that he finds. Mikan, here we go. Mikan, from this we learn, she'ein habachor notel, that the firstborn does not take pishnaim bera'ui lavo, in stuff that isn't actually the property. In other words, if he is not entitled to twice the amount of stuff that will eventually come into the property, but isn't there on the day of the inheritance, of giving the inheritance. La'achar mitat ha'av, and to clarify what we mean, is following the death of the father. Keve muchzak, that is not to be compared. Muchzak would mean property that actually is within the jurisdiction of the family. So that I wonder if that would apply to loans. In other words, if the father had loaned money to someone, and that loan had not been paid off yet, I wonder if that's what we're talking about. But certainly something similar, I would think. So that's.
I don't know if you can charge interest to a Jew.
This is not interest. It's simply saying, I lent you something, I lent you some money, I lent you property, I lent you something, right? Right now, it is not on my property. It is in your hands. So is this what it's talking about? I would imagine that Torah Tamima would explain that. So Rashi doesn't give us an example of what we mean here. We'd have to look that up and see. Lauren, anything going on on your
there's
end?
A parenthetical phrase in my English from the side of the Rashi that says an example would be an uncollected debt.
Well, I'll get the Starbucks today, okay? All right.
To
Yeah.
the Chabad site.
Yes, that's right. Yes, it'll be Chabad approved. Yeah, so that I was right along those lines. Okay.
If you loan something, you have to return it, don't you?
Yes, you do. But it would be returned if it were still out when the father died. It is not part of the property that is calculated by way of how you how you calculate what the firstborn gets. That
Oh,
doesn't come into the computation.
oh.
Any uncollected debts. That has nothing to do with interest. It has nothing, simply a debt. Debt has to be repaid. If you borrow, Harlan, I would like to think that if you borrow something from someone, you return it.
Yes, I do.
Right. But the interest is something else entirely. Yes, and you're right. Jews are not supposed to charge interest. Of course, there's the whole issue of charging interest to Jews as opposed to non-Jews. That's a whole kettle of fish right there, at any rate. Again, back to the context of how you deal in hostile societies, in societies that do not have universal values. Okay. Paragraph, new idea. So remember, we had read at the very beginning when we started studying this passage how even though the Torah gives permission to this person to marry the Eshet Yafat Torah, the beautiful woman captive, it nevertheless, Rashi told us right then and there that the Torah implies that the outcome is not going to be happy. And of course now the assumption, of course, is that the hated wife was the one that he had taken in captivity. Now, it's not saying it for sure, but there's some wisdom there. Although we also, when we studied the Torah Tamima, the suggestion was that if he only was doing it out of lust and not out of love, this did not apply. He was not allowed to marry her. So, some interesting conflicts there. Next subject. Ki yele ish ben. This is the if a man has ben sorer umorer, a stubborn and rebellious son, a stubborn and rebellious son, and nenu shomea, he does not listen, bekol aviv, to his father's voice, uva kol imor, nor to his mother's voice. He doesn't listen to them. He doesn't do what they ask of him, right? Vayisru oto, and they punish him. V'lo yishma alahem, but nevertheless, he still won't listen to them. Okay. Rashi, sorer, the word sorer, we said stubborn. So he says he interprets it as sar min haderech. He turns aside from the way. In other words, the way being decent behavior. He turns away from decent behavior. Moreh, misarev b'divrei aviv, meaning he refuses to accept the words of his father, Lashon, and this word moreh is connected to the term mamrim, rebels. Vayisru oto. So here we go. This is how he explains when I said they punish him. But this is how Sanhedrin interprets it. Mitmatrin bo bifnei shlosha. They give him this hatara. And there's an interesting concept within Jewish law that in order for a capital punishment to take place, one has to be satisfied, the court has to be satisfied that this person was doing it of their free will and volition and purely rationally. In other words, so the conversation would go something like this. The two witnesses, not who witnessed the deed necessarily, but the two people who are giving hatra'ah, would say to the person about to commit the crime, let's say violate the Shabbat. They would say to that person, do you realize that when you do this, when you violate the Shabbat in this way, you are guilty of a capital offense? And that person has to say in front of witnesses, I do. I fully understand I'm about to commit a capital offense. Now, there are other kinds of points as well. In other words, there have to be two witnesses who see him do it. And the other thing is there's lots of that goes into a definition of what, in fact, is defined as a capital offense biblically by the Torah. But nevertheless, if he is not given hatra'ah, then the trial cannot go for a capital, there cannot be a capital outcome from that trial. Doesn't mean he might not get punished, but it's like,
What if,
I'm trying to think of the laws where you have to tell a person he has the right to remain silent. What do we call Mirandized? This is Jewish Mirandizing. Okay? It's so
what if
interesting.
what if the mother rejects the father's wish to punish the son? The mother has to come in there too, some way, not only the father.
Yes.
So, even though they investigate what's going on, the elders investigate what's going on. The law says that the mother and the father must approve. If one does not approve, you can't punish the son.
I would agree. There are many, many, many safeguards regarding the actual institution of this law. And I think that there's a great deal of laws in the Torah where the issue isn't so much whether the law is actually put into practice. Not to say that it might not be, but to serve as something that teaches us and tells us and tries to make us conscious of the significance of that particular law. Not because the Torah wants to see people get punished. So, for example, I think you are absolutely right, Harlan. If it says, and by the way, the parents have to bring the son. In other words, the law only applies to a son. What happens if they have a stubborn and rebellious daughter?
Good question.
Doesn't apply.
Don't they sell her into slavery? They can do that. Isn't that a thing?
I haven't
I don't
seen
remember.
anything
Maybe.
like that. I've never come across anything like that.
Maybe
and besides
that's
which,
just too many
by the-
TV programs I've seen
maybe
with
too many TV covers.
Asian, something like that.
Golda, in that case, what's it? Kave emptor.
Right.
Okay. All right.
You would
So, no, I've
yeah.
never heard of such a thing. Okay. I don't
You
believe
have to
that
get
would be permitted.
No, the son would have to go to a psychiatrist, and he would take care of it.
I'm glad you have that faith. At any rate, yes. So, for example, if the mother refuses, and I think this is intentionally why the Torah mentions the mother here, that if the mother does not agree with the father and does not want to bring the son to the elders of the town, doesn't happen. The other piece that I recollect from when I studied Sanhedrin many, many years ago is that this applies within a very limited case. Okay? In other words, if he's younger than 13, he's a minor. You can't do this for a minor. And if he's above a certain age, he's already an adult, which means he's basically is on his own recognizance. So
Right.
the actual, I mean, it's a very brief period where you can actually apply the law as stated right now. Okay? So, at any rate, let's go on to the Rashi here. Let's make sure we get it done. Okay, so this is interesting. This is the issue that makes these particular laws, right, here in Tetze so unusual, right? Ben soreh umoreh eino chayav. He says you cannot consider this son stubborn and rebellious, right? Understanding that as a legal category, right? Eino chayav. He is not guilty ad sheyignov, until he commits a theft, right? He has to steal, v'yochal, and eat tartemar basar, a certain amount of meat, which I assume is a gluttonous amount of meat, v'yishteh chatzi log yayin, and to drink half a log of yayin, of wine. So in other words, he's a glutton and a drunkard. Okay, Shene'emar, because it goes on to say, when the parents make the declaration to the court, they say these things. They say zolel vesove, right? Meaning he's a glutton and a drunkard. V'ne'emar, and it says in Proverbs 23, Al tihi misov'ei yayin. Okay, so that would be a drunkard. Do not be amongst those who drink wine. Bezolele basar. So there's the zole or zolel, and those who consume meat, lamo, to them or with them. So Rashi's helping us understand the Hebrew here. I believe that is it. No, keep going. Uven sore umore, and a ben sore umore, neherag, is actually put to death. He's executed, al shem sofo, with regards to what he will ultimately do. And this is what's so unusual, and exactly why the application, the actual application of this law is so severely limited. We really don't want to apply this because he isn't really guilty of anything that's a capital punishment, or that would be a capital crime, excuse me, up until this point. And this is the issue. Higia Torah lesof da'ato. The Torah anticipates what he is ultimately going to do. What he is ultimately going to do. Sof, and in the end, she mechale mamon aviv, he is going to destroy, essentially, get rid of all of his father's property, or his money specifically, right? He's going to take it down to nothing. Umevakesh limodo. This is not easy to translate, this particular Rashi here, okay? It could refer to here that the father tries to train him, okay? I've seen other translations of this, ve'eno motze, and he doesn't find it. He isn't able to train him. He's untrainable. So I don't know if you have an alternative translation there, Lauren. I know that
Yeah,
Sfaria has
it
something
says,
different too.
it says, eventually he will squander his father's money,
Right.
seek what he has become accustomed to,
Yes.
not find it, and the rest you haven't gotten
I
to.
see. Okay.
So
Thank
in
you.
other words,
Thank you.
it
I
sounds
see.
like, he's used to a certain amount of
Yes.
money supporting him, and he's growing up and looking for that, but he's already squandered his father's money, and he's still
Right.
looking, to be.
Correct.
That's
Yeah.
what it seems like to
Yeah,
me.
no, I agree. I agree. So, yeah, he's gotten used to a certain lifestyle. It's a lifestyle that is way beyond anybody's means, and he can't support it. He cannot support it. And and this is what he does. So this makes a lot more sense. Thank you. For Omed beparshat drachim, so he stands at the crossroads, umelastem et habriot, and he now robs people, creatures. In other words, because he can't afford his lifestyle, he is reduced to robbing people. He becomes now a highwayman, essentially. Okay. Amrat, so that's the end. That's the ultimate place where this fellow is going to wind up. Okay. Amrat Torah. So, and this is where he might be committing murder, right? To get the money, to support his lifestyle. Amrat Torah. The Torah says, right? Yamut Zakai, let him die, Zakai, not guilty, right? Not exactly righteous, but at least he hasn't done what we just described. Velo al Yamut Chayav, and may he not die guilty of these things. Better he should die free of these things than having committed them. So, in other words, it's sort of like a protection of the community. Still, these are very difficult things. You can see in what sense this has in common with the very first parsha, the very first little paragraph we did in this, in that it is talking about very unusual kinds of circumstances and specialized circumstances, and where justice and the application of law, the rule of law, is a little more shaded and a little more complicated, but nevertheless, it's there for us to, as I said, to maybe wake us up and tell us, these are things to think about. Anyway, going on. So we're back up here actually. V'tafsuvo aviv ve'imor. His father and mother should grab hold of him. And so in analyzing all this, they say, if only the father grabs hold of him, if the mother doesn't grab hold of him, none of this, they take the Torah extremely literally here, right? His father and his mother should grab hold of him, v'hotzi'u oto el ziknei iro, and they should bring him out to the elders of his town, ve'el shar mekomo, and to the gate of his place, meaning the court, right? This is where they adjudicated cases. Va'amru, and they should make this declaration, both of them, el ziknei iro, to the elders of his town, b'nei nuzeh, this our son, sorer u'moreh, right, is stubborn and rebellious. Eino shomea bekolenu, he doesn't listen, pay attention to our voices. Zolel, there we are, zolel vesove, right? He is a glutton and a drunkard. Urgamuhu kol anshe iro ba'avanim vamet. And all the people of his town should stone him with stones so that he dies. Uvi'arta hara mikirbecha, and you shall root out, right, and literally burn out the wickedness, the evil from your midst. V'chol Yisrael, and all of Israel, Yishma'u, should hear about this, v'yira'u, and be fearful. So, not that challenging stuff for sure. Okay, here we go. V'chol Yisrael Yishma'u v'yira'u, right? All of Israel should hear about this and be fearful. Mikan, and from this, shetzarich hachraza beveit din. They need to make a declaration. The court, Beit Din, the court has to make a public declaration. Ploni so-and-so, Niskal, was stoned, al shaya ben sorer umoreh, because he was a stubborn and rebellious son. So that's up to, so we got through the first aliyah for this. I'm going to put in the little arrow and then just comment a little bit more. Let me do this. Sorry, let's go here. Ooh, sorry. Okay. Let me do this. Try and get this down. Hold on a second. I'm trying to move this here. There we go. Okay. Okay, so at least we know next, please God, if there's another year doing this, we'll start here. And then we get into some other interesting, very interesting things. I will put in the date, today's date. And 1 second, please. Okay, let's see. Okay. Stoning. Let's talk about that for a second. I'm going to stop the share. It sounds as if they pelted him. That is not the way they did it. According to, and look, none of this is pleasant. I'm not claiming it is, but what they did is the place where they did this, right, where they did executions, there was a ledge that was high up, okay, that basically they would essentially, they would tie a scarf, whatever, around the person's neck. They would basically strangle him so that he was unconscious. And then they would throw him over the side. He'd land, and they would take a large stone and drop it on the person. The idea was that it should be instantaneous and not prolonged, and that the idea of making sure that he was unconscious right at the very start. Again, we don't have the time to go into that in detail, but the idea is that, he should be unconscious immediately. And I'm going to stop here.
The mother and father does not to participate in that.
You know something? That's a good question, which will have to remain unanswered, because it certainly would be a disincentive to have this happen. So,
It said all of the people of the town.
well, no, it says doesn't it say all of them will? Yeah, yeah, they all should know about it, and they
Yep.
all should be present. Yes. Okay, I'm
Yep.
going to
Being
thank
present
everyone.
is part of it, but not
Yeah,
necessarily pushing a stone or pushing your
right.
child over
Right.
the.
But generally, the witnesses were involved in the actual execution, and I believe this was a disincentive for people to want anyone, for capital punishments. So even though they were permissible and part of the legal process, the possibilities of carrying them out was they tried to minimize that as much as possible and see it more as a disincentive. Okay, I'm going to stop the recording. Thank those who have been watching to this point. Thank you.